The spacious hotel room hummed with the activity of around 70 to 80 people. My gaze swept across the room, observing various interactions happening on the mats. Two women were engrossed in exploring each other, drawing murmurs of approval from nearby onlookers, including older couples. Then I spotted her. The turtle tattoo just above her left ankle confirmed her identity. A man in black beside me began offering unsolicited remarks. "It snaps like a door in a storm," he commented. A woman joined in, adding, "She loves taking care of multiple partners at once. We've been with her before. We're both professionals." She continued, "My wife Miranda works as a business consultant, and I'm an independent project manager known as Terry the Terminator in my field for my work in change management. We met in business school and quickly hit it off, eventually forming Business Consultant Limited. Our skills complement each other seamlessly. Miranda focuses on long-term business strategies while I tackle immediate issues. Our twin daughters, Laura and Lydia, are both in college now, and we've settled into a comfortable routine. Though Miranda can be a bit loose with money, our differences have made us a great team both at home and at work. When Miranda went away for work, I enjoyed the solitude, and she never minded when I was off-site for a week at a time. Once the girls left for college, I envisioned exciting getaways to romantic spots like Paris or Rome. But, as they say, life doesn't always follow the plan. One Sunday, while tidying up, I came across a credit card receipt from Hensley House, a high-end country hotel nearby. The total suggested a meal for 2 or 3, and assuming it was related to work, I decided to return it to Miranda later. Sundays had always been family time, and our daughters continued the tradition by calling in, so I wasn't surprised to find Miranda deep in conversation with Lydia when I came back from the garage. Lydia was going through another personal crisis. While Laura was always the calm one, Lydia was our more dramatic daughter. I tried to stay calm when it came to their relationships, showing my support without overstepping. Miranda was giving her usual advice: move on, there's plenty of fish in the sea. Without knowing all the details, I stayed quiet, believing in the motto festina lenti, make haste slowly. I thought it was best to give Lydia time to make her own decisions. Not wanting to interfere, I simply asked Miranda to say hello for me and headed to the kitchen to start on our Sunday roast. Cooking, especially with a good bottle of claret on hand, always had a calming effect. During dinner, Miranda filled me in on the details. Laura was doing well, with good grades and a steady boyfriend. Lydia, on the other hand, had been dumped after kissing someone else. I suggested that time might help heal the wound, though replacing him quickly would likely ruin any chance of reconciliation. Miranda disagreed, thinking Lydia should just move on and enjoy herself. After dinner, I took Doug, our dog, for a walk, then settled in to watch TV while Miranda prepared for a client meeting. Later, I went to bed, tossing and turning before eventually falling asleep. Miranda came to bed late, and by morning, she was already up when I awoke to Doug's distinct, unpleasant morning breath. Nothing like it to get you out of bed quickly. After walking Doug, I joined Miranda in the kitchen. Neither of us are morning people, so it was a quiet start, both of us relying on coffee to wake up. We chatted about the weather, waiting for the M25 traffic to clear. With a quick kiss and a pat for Doug, Miranda was off. It wasn't until later that I remembered the receipt in my pocket. When I placed it on her desk, I noticed it had been cashed at 10:18 p.m., likely for an overnight stay. Something didn't add up. It might have been a work event, but curiosity got the better of me. I checked my calendar and realized I wasn't home that week, but Miranda had scheduled a 3-night trip up north. However, the receipt showed that she had only gone 20 miles before stopping at Hensley House. If it was work-related, I could have easily driven her there and saved the hotel cost. Sitting in her office, staring at the receipt, nothing about her recent behavior seemed out of the ordinary. We were still intimate regularly, yet I couldn't shake the suspicion that this might be evidence of an affair. I was confused. There were no obvious signs of infidelity, and I couldn't think of anyone she might be involved with. It seemed odd that she would book a hotel when she could easily use my absences to entertain someone at home. Maybe she was doing both, or perhaps there was an innocent explanation for her stay. As I mulled it over, I realized she could be doing something similar for her current trip. I decided to call the hotel, dialing the number on the receipt. I asked for Mrs. Amanda Carmichael, but the receptionist informed me that check-in wasn't until noon and it was only 10:30 a.m. She offered to take a message, but I declined, knowing it wouldn't give me the answers I was looking for. I made another coffee and thought about my next move. Unlike some leaders who avoid facing issues head-on, I wasn't going to waste time. Confronting Miranda at the hotel might not solve everything, but it was a step forward. There could be a reasonable explanation, or I could find out she'd been stringing me along. I arrived at Hensley House at noon and spotted a small car in the parking lot, likely Miranda's. I called her phone, and she answered with a story about a highway accident and checking on me. Sensing she was hiding something, I decided to scope out the hotel, hoping to catch her off guard. I entered the hotel, checked the restaurant, and found no trace of her. I sat at the lobby bar, waiting to see if she'd show up with someone else before I called her room. Despite my suspicions, there was still a part of me that wondered if she was there for a different reason she hadn't yet mentioned. As I stepped into the lobby, a large sign immediately grabbed my attention, listing the day's activities. Monday appeared quiet, aside from a private event at the spa and fitness center scheduled to begin at 7 p.m. Intrigued, I went to the reception to ask about it. The receptionist's polite but vague response only heightened my curiosity. I wandered over to the lobby bar, where I struck up a conversation with a friendly server. He let it slip that the private gathering was actually a regular event for local couples in open relationships. Excited by this revelation, I inquired further. "Just search for Bottom Sub Club online," he winked. Using the hotel's Wi-Fi, I quickly located the club's website. For a modest annual fee of just PS20, I could join and attend events like that night's Mellow Moments at the hotel spa. As I read through the event details, an unsettling feeling began to rise in my stomach. Could Miranda be here for this? Determined to find out, I signed up for the club over the phone. A helpful representative assured me that discretion was paramount, mentioning that any charges would appear as SJB service on statements. Back home, I checked our financial records and discovered multiple transactions linked to SJB service, which deepened my suspicions. At 8 p.m., I returned to the hotel spa. A woman at the reception table sold me a mask and condoms, offering comforting words to ease my nerves. "Just head to the gym," she smiled. "Our members are very friendly." My heart raced as I donned the mask and entered the gym, unsure of what I would discover, but ready to confront the reality about Miranda. There were about 70 or 80 people present, and the organizers had tried to create a relaxed, inviting atmosphere. The room was warm, the lights dim, clearly designed to encourage attendees to undress and set aside their inhibitions. Soft jazz played from the speakers, loud enough to provide background noise without hindering conversation. Just outside the gym, a refreshment table was set up, but the real activity was happening inside. There were 8 large mats spread throughout the room, each covered with white sheets. Groups of people were gathered around them, some fully dressed, others partially or completely nude, some with masks and others without. Wearing my jacket and trousers, I felt a bit overdressed, but I had to keep my disguise intact if I was going to get the evidence I needed. The first group I observed was watching 2 slim young women exploring each other, drawing murmurs of approval from the crowd. The next group was made up of 2 older couples, their pale, rounded bodies glistening as they moved awkwardly together. The sight reminded me of a bizarre, distorted version of a sumo wrestling match. Then in the third group I spotted my wife, naked and sweaty, lying on a mat against the back wall with 2 young Asian men. Although she wasn't wearing a mask, I would have recognized her anywhere Miranda had a small turtle tattoo above her left ankle. A group of 8 or 9 onlookers stood nearby, watching and occasionally commenting or encouraging the participants. Fully dressed and masked, I remained silent, determined not to do anything that would reveal my presence. There was no way she would know I was there. Instead, I focused on discreetly recording the scene with my phone's camera, which I had concealed in my jacket pocket. Although I had signed a confidentiality agreement to enter, I wasn't about to let that stop me from gathering proof. Miranda's face was clearly visible in the footage, and I could blur the others' faces later if needed. Standing next to me, a middle-aged man in a black shirt and pants began providing his own commentary on the event. "It breaks like a door in a storm," he remarked, loudly enough for everyone to hear, though he seemed to be speaking to no one in particular. After a pause, he added, "Just look at how well she's keeping up with them." A naked woman nearby, who looked to be around Miranda's age, nodded and added, "Oh yes, she really enjoys handling 2 or 3 men at once." She was embracing a man who seemed to be the same age. She turned to the man in black and said, We've been with her a few times before, clearly showing her familiarity with the situation. I'm sure she'd be thrilled if you wanted to join us." "That's tempting," the man replied. Part of me was screaming inside, devastated by what I was witnessing, but I shoved those feelings into a dark corner of my mind. The other part of me remained focused on collecting evidence, confident that I had recorded everything I needed, both the visuals and the comments. No matter how torn I felt emotionally, I knew I had seen enough. I wasn't going to stand there any longer, watching this unfold. When I passed the spa receptionist on my way out, she seemed surprised that I was leaving so soon, but I told her I had forgotten something and would return later. To say I was upset would be an understatement. Coming to terms with the fact that Miranda was enjoying herself with strange men was devastating. The unique bond we once shared now felt completely cheapened, its value destroyed. I was in shock. After leaving the hotel, a wave of nausea hit me, and my stomach churned as if I had food poisoning. Overwhelmed with sadness, I felt a lump in my throat and had to sit in the car for a while before I could drive home. My mind began building walls around the pain, anger, and sorrow, but this personal crisis felt different from anything I had dealt with professionally. Despite my experience in change management, this was deeply personal. I refused to waste time denying what I had witnessed. I had seen her betrayal with my own eyes, and I knew I had to accept it. Determined to control the situation, I began to devise a plan to move forward. By the time I arrived home, my thoughts were clearer. I took Doug, our dog, for a short walk and then tried to soothe my pain with some Glenfarclas whiskey. Sleep didn't come easily that night, but by morning I had a new path in mind. Doug and I set off for Cornwall, England's southwestern tip, once home to fishermen but now a quiet retirement spot for wealthy Londoners. I thought about taking Doug to Belgium, but without a chip or passport it wasn't feasible. Perhaps it was for the best no tracking. After a 5-hour drive to Enway, I handed Doug over to a shelter worker, claiming I'd found him wandering without a collar. She immediately recognized him as a she-Tasu, ignoring my attempt at a zoo joke. Doug seemed slightly confused as I left, which brought some relief. Looking for a late lunch, I followed a local's recommendation and headed to the White Horse Inn. While enjoying a ploughman's lunch and a half pint, I called Jim Savage. Jim, a senior partner at a competing consulting firm, had once tried to take down our business by offering us jobs. Although we turned him down, we'd kept a friendly relationship. Jim was keen on my proposal, and despite the urgency, he agreed to meet the next day. Returning to Surrey later that evening, I decided to give Miranda a call about Doug. Though I was still angry, I knew I could channel my emotions productively and speak to her without revealing my real feelings. Coincidentally, my phone rang. "Hi, Miranda," I answered. "I was just about to call you. I have bad news. Doug got out of the garden this afternoon and was hit by a truck on the main road." "Oh my God," she cried. "Is he okay?" "I'm sorry, Miranda. He's gone," I replied. "A passerby saw him slip through the gate and run into the street. The truck driver didn't stop. I told her I'd buried Doug in the garden, and Miranda broke down in tears, muttering about poor little Doug. In reality, I had considered harming the dog myself, but I decided it was unnecessary. Doug wasn't to blame for Miranda's affair. I expressed my condolences and suggested getting a small headstone, which only triggered more sobbing. The meeting with Jim Savage went smoothly. He was confident his firm would accept my terms and promised a draft contract soon. On my way home, I stopped by a local real estate office to ask about our house's market value. It was quite substantial. I didn't call Miranda that evening, knowing she was likely waiting for comfort, but I slept better, feeling I had somewhat evened the score. The next morning, I briefly thought about Doug before recalling he was gone, relieved to be free of the responsibilities that came with him. Focusing on more urgent matters, I made an appointment with a family lawyer in Dorking. The town's name amused me, and it wasn't far away. I secured an afternoon slot, ready to move forward. To pass the time, I browsed for personalized plates on the DVLA website and looked at jewelry before heading to Dorking, making business calls along the way. At the lawyer's office, my nerves were frayed. The middle-aged lawyer listened to my story but advised caution. For a brief moment, I wondered if she shared Miranda's interests, then realized she was probably just padding her billable hours, a typical lawyer move. I reminded her we could always withdraw the petition later, though I knew that was unlikely. She agreed to file on the grounds of Miranda's infidelity. That evening, I accidentally made a curry far too spicy for Miranda, which gave me the perfect excuse to enjoy some craft beer with dinner. Casually, I mentioned a new contract in North Yorkshire that started the next day. Miranda, still upset about Doug, accepted a hug from me before we settled in to watch TV. I discreetly savoured the scent of beer and curry on her as she quietly cried. My trip to Yorkshire went well. The deal was already arranged, and the directors were thrilled to have me on board for 6 months, possibly longer. They covered all expenses, including relocation and lodging, and everything was ready for me to start right away. When Miranda called about the dead fish in the aquarium, I pretended to be surprised. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said, unaware she was speaking to the culprit I had simply stopped feeding them. "Don't worry," I replied. "I'll clean the tank when I get back." That Saturday was dreary. I made a brief stop at home before returning to Yorkshire, sorting through some paperwork while feeling detached from the gloomy mood in the house. Miranda busied herself with shopping and cooking, keeping her mind off things. We had a quiet evening watching mindless TV and sipping wine, neither of us in the mood for intimacy. Strangely, I slept well for the first time in days. When I woke, the initial shock had dulled, replaced by a cold determination to move forward. The despair had lifted, and I was now focused on my work and making the most of the situation. After lunch, I packed my car, kissed Miranda goodbye, and headed back to Yorkshire. A few days later, she was blindsided by divorce papers, thinking they were just documents for her to sign. I made sure my phone was off that day, perhaps a bit petty, but I enjoyed being unreachable. Back at the hotel that evening, I turned my phone on and saw a flood of emotional messages from Miranda. I called her back. "What's going on, Terry?" she demanded. "Funny," I replied coolly. "I asked myself the same thing last week." "This isn't funny anymore. Stop it," she said. "You're right. It's not funny," I answered. "And it's too late to stop." "What are you talking about?" she asked. "Psy House Hotel." "Bottom Sub Club," I replied. There was a long silence before Miranda sighed deeply. "I'm so sorry, Terry. I never thought you'd find out." "Well, I did, and it hurts," I said bluntly. We agreed to talk when I got home that weekend. When I returned on Saturday afternoon, Miranda was visibly anxious. I left my bags packed, unsure of what would happen next. True to British custom, Miranda put the kettle on, and over tea, she began. "I need to say this is all my fault, Terry," she confessed. I stayed silent as she continued. "I gave in to temptation. I stumbled upon the Bottoms Up Club by chance and couldn't stop thinking about it. You were away the first time I went. I was so nervous, I wore a mask and thought I'd just watch. But people approached me, and it was exciting. Before long, I joined in. It was nerve-wracking at first, but I soon realized these people were genuine and safe. I found myself enjoying it, watching others and being watched. It's about having fun with others." Miranda looked at me hopefully. I nodded. "I agree, sex with others can be fun," I said. Her smile widened until I added, "if you're unattached. When you're single, you can do whatever you want with consenting adults." I watched as her smile slowly faded. Sticking to her stance, Miranda showed no regret. "What I do with other men doesn't change how I feel about you, Terry," she said. "I love you dearly, and our life is wonderful. I hope you understand that having occasional fun with others doesn't threaten us. You can ignore it if you're not interested." "I think you're wrong, Miranda," I replied. "It's too late for me to unsee what I've seen." "What do you mean?" she asked. "Did you see me there?" I locked eyes with her. "A few weeks ago, Monday night, you were with 2 young Asian men. Apparently you enjoy public sex." "Oh my God," she gasped. "I'm so sorry," Miranda said, her voice pleading. "It must have been a huge shock, but it was just a physical thing, an exciting escape, nothing more. I only love you. I should have spoken to you about it, but I didn't know how." "You're right about that," I responded. "I wouldn't have been okay with it. Maybe keeping it secret made it more thrilling for you." Miranda continued, "I understand you're hurt, but isn't divorce too drastic?" "I don't think so," I replied. "You betrayed me, and that's not something I can accept." Miranda let out a sigh of resignation. "Can we at least think about the consequences before making any final decisions?" "I already am," I said. "We can take some time, but I doubt my mind will change." Later, I went to the Foxon pub, a place I'd never been fond of, sipping on a bland beer while thinking over my next moves. Back at home, Miranda was preparing dinner. I moved some of my belongings to the guest room. During dinner, we talked about our daughters, steering clear of the main issue. Lydia had taken Miranda's advice and found a new boyfriend after her ex had started dating her best friend. Forever Miranda explained, although I doubted that label would stick. But I had once considered Miranda my best friend, or so I thought. She noticed my distance but didn't seem to grasp how much had shifted. She mistook our conversation for a sign of reconciliation, and I let her believe that. On Sunday morning, I packed up the Beetle and headed to Yorkshire, leaving Miranda's belongings behind. When she called, she sounded confused. "Where are you? Why'd you take my car?" "I'm on my way to Yorkshire in the Beetle," I told her. "But why? What about me?" "You were asleep, just use another car." She sighed. "Fine, just don't damage it." The next day, I traded the Beetle for a red Mazda MX-5 convertible. Miranda was furious when she found out I wasn't coming back. "How am I supposed to get my car?" she demanded. "You can't," I replied. "I sold it." "What?" "It's mine." "Actually, it's registered to me," I corrected her. "That's not fair, Terry." "Neither was what you did to me," I shot back. She started calling every day, begging me to come home and talk. Then she found out I had sold my ABC shares. "How could you do that?" she screamed. "I'm a shareholder too." "I know," I answered calmly. "But I didn't need your permission, just like you didn't need mine to sleep around. You'll have to accept what happened and move on." "Terry, you're a real jerk," she spat. A few days later, she called again, this time screaming in frustration. "You don't get it, Terry. ABC had over 200,000 in the bank. We've lost access to that money for retirement." "Sorry to break the bad news," I replied, "but at least you still have a job." There was a sharp intake of breath, followed by silence, then quiet sobbing. It finally dawned on Miranda what I had done. In my deal with Jim Savage, I'd secured 51% of the shares in exchange for double the company's average yearly earnings plus the cash reserves. Jim agreed to keep Miranda on as a consultant for 2 years with a solid salary and benefits. Our house was sold to an unconditional buyer, Max Payne Associates. I made sure my identity as the buyer remained secret. It was a prime investment in an excellent location. Not long ago, Miranda called about her wedding dress. Laura, our daughter, was getting married and wanted to wear it. "I'm sorry, Miranda," I said, honestly. "I have no idea where it is." In reality, I had sold it to a shop in Yorkshire, determined to prevent my daughters from ever wearing it. A few days later, Lydia called. "Mum's furious, Dad," she exclaimed. "She just found out that diamond ring you gave her, the one symbolizing eternal love. It's a cheap knockoff, practically worthless." Feigning surprise, I gasped. "Oh no, that's awful." She must be devastated, thinking it was valuable all this time. Talk about a rude awakening. "It's strange how we assign value to things, isn't it?" I mused. "When we find out that worth was an illusion, it really stings." What Miranda didn't know was that the real diamond ring was safely tucked away in my bank's vault. Who knows, maybe it'll prove useful if I meet someone special down the road.